I think I mentioned that I kept getting referred to as an investor in like a bunch of things, and it's like, but I actually don't invest really except in companies that I help create. So I only have the only publicly traded share that I have at all is Tesla. I have no diversity on publicly traded shares.
It's like us.
Yeah, nothing. So, that's quite unusual. So, almost everyone diversifies to some degree. And then the only stock that I have of significance outside of Tesla is SpaceX, which is a private corporation. And then in order to get liquidity, which is mostly to reinvest in SpaceX and Tesla, and occasionally in provide funding for much smaller projects like Neuralink and Boring Company, then I'll actually take out loans against the Tesla and SpaceX stock. So what I actually have is whatever my Tesla and SpaceX stock is, and then there's about $1 billion of debt against that. So, which this is sometimes taken to imply that I'm claiming that I have no money, which I'm not claiming. But it's something to make it clear that you'll see some number, some big number in Forbes or something. People will think I have the Tesla and SpaceX stock and I have the cash, and I'm being somehow I'm just sitting on the cash and doing nothing and hoarding resources. I'm like, no, it's the only alternative would be to say, okay, let's give the stock to the government or something, and then the government would be running things, and the government just is not good at running things. That's the main thing. I think there's like a fundamental sort of question of consumption versus capital allocation. This is probably gonna get me into trouble, but the paradigm of say communism versus capitalism, I think, is fundamentally sort of orthogonal to the reality of actual economics in some ways. So what you actually care about is the responsiveness of the feedback loops to the maximizing the happiness of the population. And if more resources are controlled by entities that have poor response in their feedback loops, so if it's like a monopoly corporation or a small oligopoly, or in the limit, I would say a monopolistic corporation in the limit is the government. So, this is not to say people who work at the government are bad. If those same people are taken and put in a better sort of operating system situation, the outcome will be much better. So it's really just what is the responsiveness of the organization to maximizing the happiness of the people, and so you want to have a competitive situation where it's truly competitive, where companies aren't gaming the system, and then where the rules are set correctly, and then you need to be on the alert for regulatory capture, where the referees are in fact captured by the players, which is and the players should not control the referees, essentially, which can happen. I think that happened, for example, with I think the zero emission vehicle mandate in California, where California was really strict on EVs, and then the car companies managed to sort of, frankly, in my view, trick the regulators into saying, okay, you don't need to be so hardcore about the EVs, and instead you say fuel cells of the future. But fuel cells are, of course, many years away, so forever. So then they let up the rules, and then GM recalled the EV1 and crushed them in a junkyard, which was against the wishes of the owner.
Yeah, they all lined up to buy them, and they wouldn't let them buy it.
Chris Payne did this great documentary on it, and it's like the owners of the EV1, which, by the way, wasn't actually that great of a car, but they still wanted the electric car so bad that they held a candlelit vigil at the junkyard where cars were crushed.
Oh wow!
It was like a like a prisoner being executed or something like that. That was literally.
I know.
And like,
So
when is
painful.
the last time you even heard of that for a product?
Right.
You know, GM stops the product. I mean, what? I mean, listen, man, they're not doing that for any other GM product. Have you thought about doing the EV2? You know, it's kind of sometimes hard to get through these guys. You know, so anyway, I think that's a very important thing. So generally, we could see like these oligopolies forming, or duopolies, and then you get effective price fixing, and then they cut back on the R&D budget. Like kind of a silly one, frankly, is like candy. Like there's a candy oligopoly, and it's like, we don't see much innovation in candy.
So you're still working on the candy company.
Crypto candy, is that?
Boring candy.
Boring candy.
The
Wasn't
boring
it?
candy?
It's going to be boring candy.
I haven't seen a candy yet that's good enough to send out, but and it's but I think it's there's like 3 companies or something that control all the candy in the world, pretty much.
It's crazy.
And dog food. Yeah, somebody constructed like this. It's this crazy conglomerate, and it's like dog food and baby food and candy, and it's like all, you know,
Other brands.
A rendering?
yeah. And
Hundreds of brands.
yeah, you think you're buying from different companies, but it all funnels up to like 3 companies or something like that.
Don't send the rendering food to the candy company.
Yeah.
Yeah, big candy.
So you want to have like a good competitive forcing function, so that you have to make the product better, or you'll lose. Like if you don't make the product better and improve the product for the end consumer, then that company should have relatively less prosperity compared to a company that makes better products. Now the car industry, you know, is actually pretty competitive, so that's good. But the good thing about a competitive industry is then if you make a product that's better, it's going to do better in the marketplace.
Definitely.
So this is Gene Wilder's old house.
Yeah. I saw that. That's
I saw the
amazing.
photos over there.
It's lovely. Thanks for having us here as
Yeah,
well.
thank
It's
you.
really special.
Yeah, it's a cool spot, and it's got a solar glass roof.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Version 2, right?
We didn't notice it, but
Yes.
when we checked it out the second time.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my 3, so I'm waiting for version 3. Well, whatever they're going to put on, I don't care.
Give me version 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, we saw it at the store in Torrance, actually. They've got it
Yeah.
in the stores now. Yeah. Looks really good.
Well, it's actually designed such that you don't notice it. So, he's like this. Look at this old house. This is like it's an old house. I don't know, probably 50 years old, something like that, and it's quite quirky. So if you put something on that was like that didn't blend in, that it would not look right. It would be pretty strident, and this had a black comp shingle roof. So I was like, okay, let's see if we can actually have it weave in and still feel natural, look good, and and I think it's sort of achieved that goal. But yeah, this is a lovely, quirky little house. I'll show you around afterwards. It's got all sorts of weird things. It's exactly what. Sorry?
Is it Frank Lloyd? Right?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just built in increments over time by probably several people. But they would have just knocked it down and built a giant house here. So it's like,
So glad they didn't.
yeah, it's super cool.
Really amazing.
So Gene Wilder is one of my favorite actors, actually. So he's great. Awesome movies.
So when you come up with a product like the solar glass roof, I think a lot of people misunderstand that like your goal is to bring these crazy technologies to market and really create a change in the world.
Yeah.
And so I think it's fascinating that you do it through companies, and it seems like the fastest way to create that feedback loop and to really like go from inventing something to millions of people using it right away.
Yes.
So it seems like buying a Tesla is almost like the best thing you could do to help the climate crisis, because you're like turbocharging R&D and products and innovation. I feel like not enough people really understand that.
That is. I think there's lots of good things people can do for the climate, but just generally anything that is moving towards sustainable energy, whether it's sustainable energy generation through solar or with an electric vehicle. Actually, just things like better insulation in a house is really effective for energy consumption. but if I found him, oh geez, Marvin. It's ingratiating. That's Marvin the Martian.
Oh,
I actually got him a little for Halloween, a little knitted Marvin the Martian cap. So he had the little, the helmet with
yeah.
it looked super cute.
You got enough, buddy?
So did you always know, business was the way you wanted to kind of attack these problems versus, say, maybe a nonprofit or, working as a college professor or something? I don't know.
Well, when I was in high school, I thought I'd most likely be doing physics at a particle accelerator. So that's what I was. In physics and computers, I got distinctions in two areas, in physics and computer science, and those were, some of my two best subjects. And then I thought, okay, well, I want to figure out what's the nature of the universe, and so go try to working with people, banging particles together, see what happens, and then it sort of things went along, and then the superconducting super collider got canceled in the U.S., and that actually was like, whoa, what if I am working at a collider? It's been all these years, and then the government just canceled it.
Wow.
And then was like, I'm not going to do that. So, it's like. So well, we roll back a little. I was trying to figure out what when I was a kid, I had this existential crisis. I don't know, I was about 12 years old or something, and I was like, well, what does the world mean? What's it all about? We're living some meaningless existence, and then I made the mistake of reading Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, and I'm like, whew. Whoa. Don't do that. Not for me to be a little older, I think. No, and actually, lately, these days, I sort of reread it. So I was like, he's not that bad. He's got issues. No question about it. But it's anyway. But then I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams, which is quite a good book on philosophy, I think, and was like, okay. We don't really know what the answer is, obviously. But the universe is the answer, and really, what are the questions we should be asking to better understand the nature of the universe? And so, then, to the degree that we expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we'll better be able to ask the questions, and understand why we're here or what it's all about. And so, we should sort of take the set of actions that are most likely to result in us understanding what questions to ask about the nature of the universe. So therefore, we must propagate human civilization on Earth as far into the future as possible, and become a multi-planet species to, again, extend the scope and scale of consciousness and increase the probable lifespan of consciousness, which is going to be, I think, probably a lot of machine consciousness as well in the future. And that's the best we can do, basically, and that's the best we can do. So, and thinking about the various problems that we're facing, or what would most likely change the future, when they were in college, there were sort of 5 things that I thought would be I thought these were actually these. I would not regard this as a profound insight, but rather an obvious one. The internet would fundamentally change humanity, because it's like humanity would become more of a superorganism, because the internet is like a nervous system. Now suddenly, any part of the human organisms anywhere would have access to all the information.
Amazing.
Instantly.
Neuralink.
Hey, well, I can imagine if you didn't have a nervous system, you wouldn't know what's going on. Your fingers wouldn't know what's going on. Or your toes wouldn't know what's going on. You'd have to do it by diffusion.
Oh gosh.
And and the way information used to work was really by diffusion. One human would have to call another human,
or actually go
write
there.
them. Yes, like if it was a letter, you would have to write a letter. You'd have to hand that letter to another human. That would be carried through a bunch of things. Find another person would give it to you.
Inefficient.
Extremely slow diffusion. And if you wanted access to books, if you did not have a library, you don't have it. That's it.
Right.
So now you have access to all the books instantly. And if you can be in a remote, like, mountaintop jungle location or something and have access to all of humanity's information if you've got a link to the internet. This is a fundamental, profound change. So that's one thing. I was on the internet early because of in the physics community that was pretty normal, although his interface was almost entirely text and hard to use. But then another one would be obviously making life multiplanetary, making consciousness multiplanetary, changing human genetics, which obviously I'm not doing, by the way. There's a thorny subject, but it is being done with CRISPR and others. It will become normal to I think to change the human genome. It will become normal.
Like, what's the opportunity? Like, why is that something that's inevitable? Or,
well, I think for sure, as far as say getting rid of diseases or propensity to various diseases, then that's gonna be like the first thing that you'd want to edit out. So it's like if you've got like a situation where you're definitely going to die of some kind of cancer at age 55, I prefer to have that edited out.
yeah, definitely.
So I think it's just edit that out. There's the Gattaca sort of extreme thing where it's not really edited out, but it's like it's edited in for various enhancements and that kind of thing, which probably will come too. But I'm not saying arguing for or against it. I'm just saying this more likely to come than not down the road. Yeah. So then AI, really major one.
So these are all big motivational factors, to keep our consciousness going.
Oh, and it's sustainable. Yes, so sustainable energy. So sustainable energy actually was something that I thought was important before the environmental implications became as obvious as they are. It's simply because if you mine and burn hydrocarbons, then you're going to run out of them. Because it's not like mining sort of say metals, for example. If you we recycle steel and aluminum, and because that's just it's not a change of energy state. Whereas if you take fossil fuels, you're taking some from a high energy state, converting it to a lower energy state like CO2, which is extremely stable. So whereas we will never run out of metals, not a problem. We will run out of mined hydrocarbons. And then necessarily, if we've got billions, ultimately trillions of tons of hydrocarbons that were buried deep underground in solid, liquid, or gas form, whatever, but they're deep underground, you sort of move them from deep underground to the oceans and atmosphere, you will have a change in the chemistry of the surface, obviously. And then there's just a certain probability associated with, well, how bad will that be? And the range of possibilities goes from mildly bad to extremely bad. But then why would you run that experiment? That seems like the craziest experiment ever. Especially since we have to go to sustainable energy anyway. Why would you run that experiment? It's just the maddest thing I've ever heard. I'm not saying there shouldn't be some use of hydrocarbons on Earth, but there just should be the correct price placed on CO2 production. And the obvious thing to do is have a carbon tax. It's a no-brainer. I don't know, the 90+% of economists would say this, and I think of physicists, and it's just the market system works well if you've got the right price on things. It's very, very simple. And if you've got a price of zero, effectively, or very low, then it's people will behave accordingly. So it's just that's the thing that needs to get done. I think it will get done. And then if over time, as you raise the price on carbon, you can actually, I think, encourage sequestration technologies over time. And there'll be a lot of innovation in that regard. And that's the right way to do it.
So you had these realizations about, areas of big value, and you went and started Zip2. You sold it, got 20 million cash. You were the largest shareholder of PayPal at the time eBay acquired it. I think you got 100 60 million or something like that. You know, you have enough money basically for an entire lifetime. Why go and put your money into SpaceX, which is a huge, you know, risky operation, or Tesla? Why not just kind of, you know, relax?
Sure. So yeah, basically, you know, I graduated from Penn with basically physics and economics, and then we actually did a road trip to Stanford with Robin Wren, who was in my physics class, and now works at Tesla actually.
That's cool.
Yeah, and he grew up in Shanghai.
Yeah.
So
That's cool.
yeah, this was a very smart guy. He ended up continuing at Stanford, and I ended up going on deferment a couple days into the semester. But I was going to be studying material science and the physics of high energy density capacitors for use in electric vehicles. So the intent was, I was going to go, okay, I'm going to work on energy storage solutions for electric vehicles. And I'd worked at a company called Pinnacle Research for a couple summers that did high energy density capacitors. I was going to try to do effectively like a solid state version of what they were doing with it's going to get very complicated from a technical standpoint, but they were using a ruthenium tantalum oxide. Ruthenium is extremely rare and expensive. You cannot scale that. So it's like, can you find a substitute for ruthenium? But we're able to get to energy densities comparable to a lead-acid battery, but with incredibly high power density. So,
Well, what do you want?
I can go down a deep rabbit hole there, but
What's the purpose of a supercapacitor in an EV?
Ultra capacitor.
no, I think with the advent of high-energy lithium-ion batteries, a capacitor is not the right path.
What was your thinking back then, though, that made you think it could be useful for EVs?
I want to use advanced chip-making equipment to make capacitors that were precise at a molecular level. So at the, just a level of precision that was sort of unheard of in capacitors. Like capacitors, energy is a function of its area and a separation distance. So if you can have very tiny separation distance, and you can inhibit quantum tunneling. Like I said, how deep things get pretty esoteric. So you're going to inhibit quantum tunneling, get a very short gap, and then you could, in theory, get to very high energy densities by making capacitors in the way that you would make an x86 processor. And since there were tens of millions of dollars going into chip making R&D, that I thought there might be a way to make an advanced capacitor using chip making equipment instead of conventional means.
So is it off the table? Ultra capacitor?
It's unnecessary.
Okay.
Interesting.
It's unnecessary. I think it's probably physically possible, but it's unnecessary at this point.
I mean, I know a lot of people were talking about Maxwell, and they'd been working on some stuff with capacitors.
But the funny thing is that when I was doing my internships at this advanced capacitor company called Pinnacle Research, which was in Los Gatos, we talked a lot about Maxwell. And Maxwell was also trying to make high energy density capacitors. Now Tesla acquired Maxwell.
It's so
Full
cool.
circle. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're looking forward to that investor day.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big deal.
That's great. Great to know.
Maxwell has a bunch of technologies that where if they're applied in the right way, I think can have a very big impact.
Like the dry electrode stuff?
That would be one of them.
Oh,
That's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure.
okay.
Much bigger deal than it may seem. Yeah. And there's a few other things.
With the space that it takes up for the ovens, that for the current technology, you can save all that real estate space now. That's one aspect, and the cost reduction, the weight savings. I mean, there's so many pluses, right?
Yes, I mean there's many things there, but I'll have to wait until whatever battery day,
Sure.
which is hopefully in a few months. But I think we've got some pretty exciting things to share. So.
Gally's very excited.
Yeah. It seems like the pace of the innovation of the battery thing has just taken off. Like since you guys have more capital and being able to like have the Gigafactory be vertically integrated. Just seems like no other car company is making that many batteries, so they're not even thinking about what comes next. But that
They're not
huge
even-
you know,
Man,
Not even come close at all.
Taycan 201 miles.
not even.
That's a joke.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
true. The other car companies just really want to outsource battery technology. Not even making like this battery module and cell, but they're obviously outsourcing the cells, but even outsourcing the modules and the packs.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like they're really not thinking about fundamental chemistry improvements, and there's some pretty deep wizardry at Tesla on this front. I should say a bit about like electric vehicles or sustainable energy in general. You know, I said it was pretty, I think, obvious to not just to me, but to a lot of people, even go back 30 years or longer, that we must have a sustainable energy solution. In fact, it's tautological. If it's not sustainable, we must at some point find an alternative to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even if there were no environmental impact to the sort of fossil fuel economy, then we would run out of them, and then we'd have economic collapse, and well, civilization would fall apart. So that was actually my initial motivation for electric vehicles. It's like, okay, we've got to have a solution that does not require mining hydrocarbons. That is sustainable in the long term. It was not actually initially from an environmental standpoint, because I had not realized the gravity of the environmental situation at that time. And I thought, actually, for sure, by now we'd have electric cars. Like,
For sure.
but
Are we back on the moon?
yeah, totally. Why are we not back on the moon?
Exactly.
It's insane.
It is insane.
If you said told somebody in '69 that we'd not be back on the moon, and in like 2020, they'd be like, you might have gotten punched, honestly, because they'd be like, you're just, it's like so insultingly rude to the future of humanity. Because they'd be like, what is wrong with you?
It's encouraging.
Of course
SpaceX is encouraging, though.
Yeah. So it's like we should have a base on the moon. We should have sent people to Mars. None of that's occurred. You know, we've got to make that happen. Yeah. So but on the sustainability front, it was really, like I said, initially not so much from an environmental standpoint, but from a necessity of replacing a finite resource in order to ensure that civilization could continue to grow. And then the urgency of it became much more obvious, like, wow, we really better do something, because the environmental stuff is becoming quite serious. And the inertia of large existing companies is just hard to appreciate. They just want to keep doing the same thing, and maybe 5% different every year, maybe 5% different. Big companies hate change. So then at the time that Tesla, was created, there was no one was doing electric cars. No, there weren't really startups. The big car companies weren't doing it. GM and Toyota canceled their EV programs.
Now everybody's doing it right now. Like,
And their mom.
Everybody's talking
Mom.
about it.
Everyone and the mom is doing it.
and we would all like to congratulate about the Gigafactory 3.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Epic.
amazing. And I would like to know, like, why China is the best country to build the first foreign Gigafactory.
China is the biggest consumer of cars in the world. So it's the biggest. So that alone would be enough to do it. I think also there was a lot of uncertainty about tariffs, and it's like we potentially would be unable to sell effectively in China if we did not have a factory locally.
Yes.
Or at least unable to sell at prices that weren't extremely high. Those are really the two main reasons. I think but I think there's also a third important reason that there's just so much talent and drive in China that I think it's a good place to do a lot of things. And the evidence is there in the incredible progress in the factory, which was built with very, very high quality in a very short period of time. The cars coming out of Shanghai are already very high quality.
I can tell, and
Yeah.
the run rate is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that they use the Chinese badge as well. It's like a symbol of pride and
Sure.
made in China. So
Yeah, it's cool. It's super cool.
How did Tesla manage to get the first wholly owned foreign car company in China?
Yeah.
I mean, a factory.
I've went to China many times, and they kept saying that we would have to do this, majority local owned venture, and I said that and we had to partner with someone. I said, we're a little late to the dance here, so who would we partner with? There's nobody left, and also we're just a little company, so we're the I kept saying we should get married. And we're a bit young.
That's a good example.
We're young, and then then also as pointing out, there's certainly Chinese companies that are going to, they're establishing factories in the U.S. I mean, there's like Faraday Future and that kind of thing, and that's 100% owned by them. And so, to be fair, it should be allowed that an American car company should be able to own its factory in China as well. And so we, talked to them for over a number of years, and they eventually said, okay, well, we'll change the law. So they changed the law. But now other companies can do it as well. So it's not just limited to Tesla.
And how much of that production hell, like learnings, have really enabled? Because I don't want to bring up CapEx, but one of my favorite things is the stats in the shareholder letter. It's so much cheaper, not only faster, but it seems like you guys have learned so much from the Fremont factory, and that really enabled kind of a turbocharged build for Shanghai.
Yeah, I think the big difference is we are way less dumb than we were. So the foolishness of capital expenditures was very high, and it's less high now. And then with the Shanghai factory, we designed out all of or as much of the foolishness as we could think of that exists at Fremont and in Nevada. So we just made a lot of decisions that weren't smart, and we designed those out such the production line is much simpler. So it's much simpler and better implemented. And then we also found that in most cases the suppliers were more efficient in China as well than in the U.S. So but we've also managed to get a lot more output from existing equipment in the U.S. as well. So the Model 3 body line in Fremont, for example, was only ever meant to do 5,000 cars, Model 3s a week, and it's doing 7,000.
Wow.
Nice.
So,
Wow, nice.
And it, with turning off a bunch of unnecessary things that were being done. So there was a lot of foolish things that we were doing. So and we changed some of the designs and made it easier to. It's like hundreds of little things to make it easier to build, and so being able to get 40% more output off the same